So it's been a few weeks since the end of the so-called 12-day war between Israel and Iran. And I want to tell you not just who are the real winners here, but also how I came to this particular conclusion. But before I tell you that, I just want to mention a few things. Those who are following my channel, Political Alchemy, will know that the analysis we've given here has been pretty much spot on. I'm not here to, toot my own horn and pat myself on the back. I want to explain because there's a lot out there in terms of political analysis on various social media sites, most of which get things wrong or are incomplete. And I think major reason for this is bias. People actually just want to hear analysis that confirms their beliefs rather than challenge it. And that's a major reason why this channel exists, to give you as best as possible as we can, in an unbiased way, the analysis and explanation of what's really going on. You see, I did a video that explained that if Iran and Israel were to engage in a war, it will be fought in the air. And this is exactly what we saw. I explained that in terms of air superiority, Israel will have the key advantages. But similarly, I explained that Iran's main aerial assault will be through overwhelming Israel's air defenses through, drone, missiles, ballistic and hypersonic, etc. And again, this is exactly what we saw. But again, people might turn around and say, well, that's not particularly profound analysis. The key point I mentioned, however, in these videos when I addressed the issue of Iran was Iran's objective. It's all about preserving the Iranian clerical regime. It's not about defeating Israel. It's not about liberating Palestine. It's not about coming to the aid of the people of Gaza. It's about preserving Iranian interest, in particular Iranian clerical regime. Its actions therefore is never to escalate but to project power while keeping the door open for negotiations. So it uses its projection of power to negotiate better conditions for itself to preserve its regime. And that's exactly what happened. While others were talking about Russia and China being dragged into a conflict and potentially World War III, claims that this could spread to include other Arab countries that will join on the side of Iran, all of this was just, incorrect. Although the second part about, spreading to other parts of the Arab countries isn't totally incorrect, but I'll explain that at the end of my video. Even when America bombed nuclear facilities in Iran and the subsequent reaction by Iran, all of which on this channel through community posts I said would herald the end of the conflict that we're seeing today. 2 days later, there was a ceasefire. So those who watch my channel should feel validated that inshallah, bi'idhnillah, that they are getting as best or as accurate as information as possible that we can present in an unbiased way. That analysis comes from understanding the history, development, and also fundamentally the relationships various states have with amongst each other. So when I explain to you the reasons of who actually won or potentially could be seen as winners, this isn't about being biased, sectarian or otherwise, wanting one side to win over another. No, it's an attempt to give you a clear understanding, a clear picture of the reality, because only by really understanding what's going on, can we make correct decisions, understand what's actually occurring, and therefore potentially understand what actions as an ummah we should be doing, and not being fooled or manipulated into thinking that the actions are based on ulterior motives. So who really won? Let's take a step back and understand what winning means and whether each country achieved its implicit war aims. Iran acts like a pufferfish. For those who don't know what a pufferfish is, whenever this fish feels threatened, it expands its body with air, giving the impression it's bigger than it actually is. This is to bluff to the predator not to attack. But ultimately, this is just, hot air. Iran's actions for the past 20 years has been to create a network of proxies, whether in Lebanon with Hezbollah, Yemen with the Houthis, or even use Hamas in Palestine. This was never about creating an axis of resistance or a Shia arc of resistance, or, spreading Shiism and Shia-led government across the Arab and Muslim world. I'm not saying that there aren't people in Iran who don't have this as a goal, but this was more wishful thinking than a real strategic objective from the senior policy planners of Iran. Their real goal was to use their proxies to flex their muscles to give the impression it's more influential, more powerful in order to preserve the Iranian clerical system, a system that is more about preserving power for the elite than to spread Shiism throughout the Muslim world. It's like a pufferfish in that example. Anyways, Why do I explain this? Because while Iran achieved one of its key goals, regime preservation that is, it did so at the price of looking weak and being embarrassed. It lost control of its airspace, its top leadership including nuclear scientists were targeted and assassinated. Even after 20 years of preparation, it had no answer to Israel's airstrikes and infiltration of Mossad agents within its top ranks. Its proxies, particularly Hezbollah, did next to nothing, showing that they pretty much weren't this famed threat to Israel. You see, in the short term, while Iran may have prevented Israel from achieving its main objective of regime change, it did so at the price of being humiliated on the world stage. Compare this to what Pakistan recently did against a cowardly surprise attack by India. Pakistan's defenses looked capable and strong and was able to take down a number of aircrafts from India. So Iran achieved a short-term victory, but the cost in the long term will be felt by the Iranian regime. And that's because Iran is always a constant state of reacting and attempting to de-escalate. It looks weak. It's like a pufferfish in that sense. It tries to give these big pronouncements, implies itself as being bigger and more powerful than it is, but when it comes to the actual core of the issue, not just to react but to enact its own agenda, it doesn't do that, but rather it retreated. But what about Israel? Israel made two strategic blunders. The first is that although they took the initiative with their cowardly attack at night, their weakness was exposed for the entire world to see. See, the key problem for Israel is what's called strategic depth. Strategic depth is the ability to absorb a military attack. In basic terms, if the distance between your front lines where, the attacks are taking place and your vital infrastructure is small, then all centers of your country is open to attack. Your power plants, your military bases, your water desalination plants, your civilian centers, your economic centers, basically your country is open to attack. And this is exactly what we witnessed. Even with America, Britain and France providing air defenses, even with Arab countries allowing Israel to use its airspace and military bases where American fighters are stationed, even with all of this, Israel couldn't effectively defend against Iranian missile bombardment. Just look at this map. As soon as Iran launched a barrage of missiles and drones, the entire map of Israel is lit up red. The fact is, Iran, even with this ability to actually target the whole of the country, were not interested in really disabling Israeli infrastructure. But what can be seen was the inherent geographical weakness that Israel has. I've said this before. Israel is a tiny country, population of 9 million, with an Arab population of 2 million, meaning the Jewish state, which is what they call themselves, only has around 7 million Jews. More than a quarter of them have dual nationality. We even saw how Israeli civilian airliners had to be flown out of the country to Cyprus for fear that they'd be destroyed, and probably also to prevent Israelis fleeing Israel to their home countries. This is why Israel's plan to create strategic depth is to take ever more land, not just West Bank and Gaza, but also southern Lebanon, Sheba Farms, Golan Heights and the Druze areas of Syria. Analysts talk about Greater Israel as though this is a biblical prophecy that Jews are trying to enact. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't some fundamentalist Jews who think this way, but most Zionist Jews in Israel are secular, the ones in government. Their Greater Israel plan is more about building this strategic depth. That has to be clear. And also, fundamental part of creating this strategic depth is to create pliant Arab and Muslim regimes within the area, ensure that no other country, Arab or Muslim, is sufficiently strong enough to rival Israel or threaten Israel. You see, Israel isn't looking for partnership and cooperation. It's looking to subjugate the other countries because its existential crisis is real. The threat to its very existence is real. It is really that vulnerable. And that vulnerability is now clear for all to see. But I said Israel made two strategic blunders. So what's the second one? It showed a rift between American and Israeli interests. On the surface, America tries to give the impression that they are one with Israel, and certainly they do have a strong alliance. But there are also clear red lines and differences for America. America is not interested in Iranian regime change and all that it entails, boots on the ground, the removal of Iranian regime, and not knowing what will occur post-clerical rule. America's attack on Iranian nuclear facilities was more about giving a face-saving exit out of the war where it could force Israel to stop its attack while claiming that Israel and America had won than it was really about taking out Iranian nuclear facilities. But it's pretty clear from Trump himself, He wasn't happy with Israel attempting to prolong the war. He made it very clear that they had to stop any attacks against Iran.
I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it.
Even with the Iranian regime claiming that, all hell will break loose if America attacks Iran, the actual reaction was comical. Pre-warning Qatar and thus America that they will attack Al Udeid military base that houses Americans. It's almost exactly the same thing that happened after America assassinated Qasem Soleimani, a top general from the IRGC. Here, I'll just let Trump explain how that went down.
They called us up and they said, listen, we have no choice. We have to hit you because we have our own self-respect. And I understood that. We hit them. They got to do something. We're going to launch 18 missiles at a certain military base that you have. And you remember that night. Interesting night. I was the only one that wasn't nervous because I knew what was going to happen. They told us that don't be concerned. We're going to launch 18 missiles at your military base, but none of them will hit the base.
America allowed Iran a face-saving exit to the conflict, a pre-warned attack against an empty American base in Qatar. This is understood if you understand the relationship Iran and America have with one another. America allows Iran to operate because it serves their American interest in the Middle East. I'm not just talking about how Iran helped America invade Iraq in 2003 or previously helped America invade Afghanistan in 2001. Can you actually believe that Iran was working with America to invade both Iraq and Afghanistan? Iran also helped quell Shia militias who were attacking American military bases and American military in Iraq at the beginning of the war in 2003. But there's also another alignment of interest. Iran is America's scarecrow in the Middle East. The Muslim world, particularly the Gulf countries, have immense amounts of wealth, like unimaginable amounts of wealth, but they are also weak. Iran operates as a threat to Arab countries, and in doing so pushes Arab countries, particularly oil and gas rich Gulf countries, to seek American protection, pushing them firmly in the American camp and therefore keeping or staving away China's influence and Russian influence within the region. Iran is therefore a massively useful tool or scarecrow within the region. However, America's strategy is now changing. I've done a number of videos explaining this. America has a declining economy. Its military expenditure is massive. But what's even bigger is the $37 trillion debt. Just the interest repayment is more than the total American military expenditure now. And as Adam Ferguson's statement comes to mind, this 18th century political philosopher, when he said that when debt servicing is greater than military expenditure, then a country ceases to be a great power. This is what's happening to America now.
It's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense. But if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country.
To preserve its empire, it wants to roll back its military bases and rather make the Arab countries under the leadership of America spend money on the defenses of the Gulf and the Arab countries. Create a security pact. That means the ultimate objective for America is now secure stability of these regimes, get them to spend on defense, roll back its military footprint in the Middle East, or at the very least get the Gulf countries to pay the American military bases. All of this requires stability, so the conflict between Israel and Iran will ultimately create instability for America's long-term plan within the region. And thus here lies the fault lines between Israel and America. Israel wants regime change in Iran. Israel doesn't want even a semblance of a competitor in the region. For them, it's about creating strategic depth and weakening any potential rival so they can subjugate the region as a whole. But America can no longer afford this approach of invasion, occupation, and regime change. It wants compliant and stable Middle Eastern regimes. And even if Iran is rhetorically hostile, but ultimately doesn't threaten the stability and therefore the status quo of the Middle East, then it's happy for them to ultimately go on. Yes, in the future they'll look for regime change, but maybe through soft power, funding protests, undermining the confidence people have in the regime, or even maybe the use of special forces, but not in the traditional sense of boots on the ground and an all-out war like they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Look, instability isn't just about Iran, it's about the entire Middle East. That's the concern. And I just want to give you an example of this. When Iran did its pre-staged attack against US military base in Qatar, something happened. Qataris themselves began coming out and protesting. You know, a protest in a rich Gulf country, that's simply unheard of. And why? Because Qataris asking, why the hell are we in the line of fire because of American bases? And that's the key issue. If Iran began attacking other American bases like in Jordan, would the Jordanians, a large proportion of whom are Palestinians, defend these American bases? The very same bases used to defend Israel? Or would they actually celebrate that US bases in Jordan are being attacked? Same in Saudi. Would Saudis who've seen their brothers and sisters slaughtered in Gaza come out and risk their lives to defend American bases in their own country? Suddenly we are now seeing the issue. And don't think that the Arab rulers in these countries represent the feelings and sentiments of the Muslims in these lands. They don't. And forcing Arab Muslim militaries to defend American bases which are under attack from Iran would set or potentially set these countries alight, potentially creating a chain reaction that could see the overthrow of these Western-backed regimes. As the saying goes, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Once that occurs, America's plans to create a security pact within the Middle East with these compliant and pliant Arab regimes will be thrown into turmoil, and a potential for real change could potentially occur, one that no longer adheres to the Western and American-led order within the region. So who are the real victors then? With the ceasefire and the weakening of Iran, breaking the so-called axis of resistance, showing that Iran acts as a pufferfish, doesn't really have real weight, and with Russia and China clearly not willing to challenge American hegemony within the Middle East, then the Arab and Gulf countries' regimes clearly come out as victors. They stave off any potential protest that they could destabilize their regime through the ceasefire, and they have Iran weakened and retreated, looking for negotiations with the great Satan that is America. Then these Arab regimes come out, at least in the short term, looking relatively stable. And ultimately, that means American plans for the region has been maintained. However, as the Quran states, they plot and Allah plans, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. We've seen how exposed not just Israel is, but also American military presence is in the region. The Arab and Muslim world needs to realize its hidden strength here, and that comes through understanding what's really going on. Correct and accurate analysis. If we understand then that America is in decline, Israel is strategically vulnerable, America is looking to withdraw its direct military presence within the region as it's now unaffordable, therefore that the only thing that's now maintaining Zionist American status quo within the region are these tin pot Arab dictators. The potential for change is there. We just need to realize our strengths and be clear about the correct Islamic direction.